My dear brothers and sisters, there are moments in the life of a person and of a nation when the weight of the world feels too much to bear, when the fractures in our society feel beyond repair, when every headline reminds us not of how far we've come, but how deeply divided we remain, when our own hearts carry more questions than answers, more grief than joy, and more fatigue than fire. I speak to you today not as someone with all the solutions, but as a fellow traveler, one who hears the cries, feels the heaviness, and still believes there is a sacred path forward. My friends, there comes a time in every life, in every nation, when the fractures we've long tried to ignore finally reach the surface. A time when the pain, confusion, and division we carry become too heavy to bear in silence. I believe we are living in such a time. You may feel it as you wake up each morning, a tightness in your chest, a heaviness in your spirit, as if something sacred has been lost in our shared life, something we can't quite name, but deeply mourn. Perhaps you've whispered it in your quiet moments. Everything feels broken. You may have clicked on this message out of curiosity, or maybe desperation. Maybe you're someone of faith, or maybe you walked away from faith long ago, wounded by it, or wondering where God went. Wherever you find yourself today, you are welcome here. This space is for all who are tired, all who are searching, all who feel the unraveling of something once held dear. And I want to tell you, what feels like an ending may in fact be an invitation. Yes, I see it too. The anger, the fear, the shouting matches that have replaced conversations. I see how easily we turn against one another, based on race, politics, gender orientation, class, beliefs. I see how many of us are carrying private battles while trying to survive public storms. Our families are fractured. Our trust in institutions is thin. Many of our churches are shrinking, and our young people are quietly walking away from anything that feels hollow, harsh, or hypocritical. And yet I do not believe we are beyond hope. I do not believe our nation is too far gone. I do not believe you are too far gone. I do not believe that despair gets the final word. What I do believe, deep in my bones, deep in the traditions I've studied and the people I've served, is that even when everything feels broken, something holy can still rise. Even when we stand in the ashes, there is a spirit that calls us not to give up, but to begin again. The God I know, the God I've given my life to, does not abandon people in the wilderness. And God builds something new because of the wilderness. Our politics are broken. Our trust in one another is broken. Our sense of common purpose has shattered like glass. Even within our own families, friendships, and communities, the fault lines are visible. We speak past each other, we shut down, we draw lines in the sand, and too many of us, especially the young, are walking away from the institutions and ideals that once gave us meaning. This is not simply a political crisis. It is not only economic or cultural or ideological. What we are facing now at its deepest level is a spiritual crisis, one that has taken root in our hearts as fear, loneliness, and exhaustion, one that manifests as anger and hopelessness, one that asks the question we must all answer: who are we really? And who do we want to become? Maybe your wilderness right now is personal. Maybe it's your marriage, your health, your grief. Maybe it's your weariness from trying to be strong all the time. Maybe it's your questions about faith or God or the church. Or maybe your wilderness is more public, a sorrow for what is happening to our democracy, to our justice system, to our sense of shared humanity. I see all of it. I feel all of it. And I ask you to pause just for a moment and breathe. You are not alone. There are millions, yes, millions, who feel what you feel, who worry as you worry, who yearn for something more grounded, more merciful, more honest than what this world seems to offer right now. And here is what I know to be true. In every generation, in every era of despair, there has always been a faithful remnant. Those who rise not with rage, but with resolve, not with pride, but with purpose, not with domination, but with dignity. People who choose to be bridges rather than walls, peacemakers rather than performers, truth tellers rather than echo chambers. I believe you are one of them. I speak to you not as someone with all the answers, but as a pastor, a citizen, and a fellow pilgrim on the road. I speak as one who believes deeply and stubbornly that we are not beyond healing, that even now, even in this moment of heartbreak and confusion, the Spirit of God is still hovering over the waters, whispering order into the chaos, beckoning us toward life. But we must listen. We must slow down long enough to hear that still, small voice that we have drowned out with noise and certainty and pride. We must open our hearts to a deeper wisdom, one not found in viral tweets or shouting matches, but in the sacred rhythms of humility, compassion, and truth-telling. We do not need to be perfect to be faithful. We do not need to have it all figured out to show up with compassion. We only need to say yes, to begin again, to believe again, to build again. Because while we cannot always choose the conditions of our time, we can choose how we respond. And the response that will save us, individually and collectively, will not be more hatred, more fear, more retribution. It will be courage, it will be mercy, it will be love in public. It begins with honesty. We cannot pretend things are fine. They are not. Our children are suffering, mental illness is surging, loneliness is an epidemic, mistrust in institutions, government, media, even the church is at historic highs. And amidst all this, we find ourselves longing, not for more outrage, but for something real. A word of hope, a reason to believe, a sense that our lives still matter and that goodness can still prevail. I am here to tell you, it can. We are not condemned to repeat our worst mistakes. We are not destined to destroy one another. But to change direction, we must do something deeply countercultural. We must choose mercy. We must choose dignity. We must choose courage. Courage to admit when we've been wrong. Courage to forgive those who have hurt us. Courage to speak truth, even when our voices tremble. Courage to build bridges instead of walls. You see, the healing of our nation will not begin in Washington. It will not begin in the headlines or at the ballot box. It will begin in the human heart, in your heart and mine, when we choose to treat one another not as enemies, but as fellow children of God. And I want to say something to those who are tired, to those who have been carrying the weight of injustice, of racism, of rejection, of abuse, of silence, to those who feel invisible, unheard, unwanted. You are not alone. You have not been forgotten. Your pain is real, and so is your power. The God I serve does not look away from suffering. The God I serve comes close. God draws near to the brokenhearted. God weeps with the wounded. And God dares to believe that even now, we, yes, even we, can rise. So I ask you today to listen, not just to me, but to your own spirit. What is stirring within you? What have you silenced for too long? What burden have you been carrying that you're afraid to name out loud? And what truth do you know in your heart that the world so desperately needs to hear? Not in anger, but in love. Not in dominance, but in solidarity. Not in fear, but in faith. Faith that the same Spirit who raised Christ from the dead can raise us too, from despair from division, from numbness, from indifference. Faith that there is still a place for kindness, for justice, for beauty, for belonging. Faith that we can be more than what we have become. Some of you may ask, but what can I do? I'm just one person. To you I say, it always begins with one. One act of courage, one voice of truth, one embrace of grace. One person who chooses love in a world that profits from hate. The story of our time is not yet written. And the future of our nation, of our families, of our churches and schools and neighborhoods will not be written by those who shout the loudest, but by those who show up with humility, with clarity, with compassion, and say, here I am, use me. You are not powerless. Even now, in a world that feels broken, you are part of what God longs to heal. The brokenness around us is not the end of the story, and our task is not to escape it, but to enter it with faith, not a faith of platitudes or easy answers, but a rugged, real, embodied faith that holds sorrow and hope at the same time. That is the faith I've learned from the Gospels. That is the faith I've seen lived out by saints and skeptics, activists and artists, young people and elders. That is the faith that walks into a broken room and says, peace be with you. That is the faith that sees a cross and still dares to speak of resurrection. So if your spirit is tired, if your heart is bruised, if you've wondered whether goodness still matters, I want you to know this: yes, it matters. You matter, and there is still time to choose a different way. This is not the time to harden our hearts. This is the time to open them. Not the time to cling to fear, but to reach for courage. Not the time to wait for others to change, but to ask God to begin the change in us. Because the truth is, we belong to each other. And the more we remember that, the more we live like it's true, the more healing becomes possible. Not overnight, not without struggle, but slowly. This is your invitation, not to save the world, but to help heal the piece of it that God has placed within your reach. A neighbor, a family member, a stranger, yourself. I believe in us. I believe we still have within us the power to become something holy, not perfect, but reconciled, not uniform, but united, not triumphant, but tender. This is the path of Jesus. This is the call of every conscience. This is the heartbeat of America at its best. So let us begin, not with blame, but with blessing, not with fear, but with faith, not with rage, but with a sacred resolve to become people of peace in a time of turmoil. And maybe, just maybe, generations to come will look back at this moment and say, that was when they remembered who they were. That was when the healing began. There's a lot happening in our world right now, more than any of us can fully take in. We're bombarded by headlines, updates, warnings, and debates. It feels like something new is breaking every day. But if we pause long enough, if we step back from the noise, we begin to see something deeper than politics or economics or news cycles. We begin to see the deeper ache, what I would call a spiritual crisis. This isn't just about left versus right. It's not only about policy or elections. It's something far more personal, far more intimate. It's about what's happening to our souls. We're anxious, we're angry, we're exhausted. And many of us have lost something we didn't even know we needed. A sense of meaning, of belonging, of peace. We see the signs of it everywhere. The rise in depression and loneliness, the way we talk to each other online and in person, the fear that keeps growing in our hearts, the numbness we feel just trying to get through the day. These are not just emotional or mental health issues, though they are surely that. They are also signs that something spiritual has gone quiet in us. We've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten what it means to care for one another, to believe in goodness, to trust in something greater than ourselves. A spiritual crisis shows up when people stop believing that life can be different. It shows up when we turn inward, protect ourselves, and stop reaching out. It shows up when the church forgets its calling and becomes silent in the face of injustice. When families stop talking. When neighbors stop caring. When we feel more alone in a crowd than we do in solitude. This is the moment we are in. A moment when our structures may still stand, but the foundation beneath them is trembling. And it's not because we don't have enough information. It's not because we aren't smart or capable. It's because somewhere along the way we've lost touch with the sacred, both in ourselves and in each other. That's what makes this crisis so hard to fix. We can't solve it with better policies alone. We can't solve it with more technology or louder opinions. What we need is a deeper kind of healing, a spiritual remembering, a return to what matters most: compassion, courage, humility, mercy, and love. And so, before we talk about what needs to change in the world, we must be willing to look inward, to ask hard questions about our own hearts. Where have we grown cold? Where have we given in to cynicism? Where have we stopped hoping? This isn't about blame, it's about awakening. The first step toward healing a broken world is to name what's broken inside us. Only then can we begin to restore it. Only then can we find our way home. So if you're feeling tired or overwhelmed, or like something deep within you has been forgotten, know that you're not alone. This is the soul of a generation crying out for something real. And naming that cry, acknowledging this spiritual crisis, is not weakness, it's the beginning of strength. It's the first step back to God, back to each other, and back to ourselves. Let's not be afraid to name what's really going on, because when we do, we open the door for healing. And that's where hope begins. We are living in a time when wounds are everywhere. Wounds of the body, yes, but even more so, wounds of the spirit. People are hurting in ways they don't always speak aloud. They carry the pain of rejection, injustice, betrayal, fear, and silence. And as a nation, we carry collective wounds, some old, some fresh, that have yet to truly heal. We cover them up with noise, with anger, with distraction. But the pain is still there, just under the surface. And into that pain, God speaks a word we don't often hear in public life anymore: mercy. Mercy is not weakness. It is not passivity. Mercy is the deep, courageous choice to see the pain of another and respond with compassion rather than condemnation. It is the willingness to say, I will not repay pain with pain. I will not harden my heart. Mercy is what opens the door to healing when everything else has failed. We need mercy in this country, not just in our policies, but in our personal lives, in how we speak to one another, in how we respond to those who disagree with us, in how we remember those who have been harmed, neglected, or forgotten. Without mercy, we grow cold. Without mercy, we grow cruel. But with mercy, we begin to soften the soil of the soul so that something new can grow. Mercy does not ignore justice, but it holds it with tenderness. It says, yes, there must be truth. Yes, we must reckon with the wrong. But even as we do, we will not give up on one another. Even in anger, we will not abandon love. Imagine if our national conversations were rooted in mercy. If our leaders spoke not just with authority, but with compassion. If we could look at our neighbor not as a threat or a stranger, but as someone created in the image of God, just as we are. Imagine what would shift in our communities, our schools, our homes. Mercy is not just a personal virtue. It's a public power. And when we choose it, especially when we have every reason not to, we remind the world that grace is still possible, that people can still change, that wounds can still heal. I believe God is calling us as a people, not just the church, but the whole nation, to rediscover the power of mercy, to stop fighting for the last word and start listening for the first sign of pain, to build a new kind of strength, not built on pride, but on humility, not on winning, but on healing. And so I ask you, where can you show mercy today? Who needs it from you? And just as importantly, where do you need to receive it yourself? Because sometimes the hardest person to forgive is the one in the mirror, but mercy must start there too. This wounded nation needs more than noise. It needs more than blame. It needs mercy lived and extended in love. And when we begin to offer it, we open the way for something holy to rise from the ruins. Let us not grow weary of being kind. Let us not turn away from mercy. It is God's gift to a hurting world, and it may be our only path forward. We live in a time when fear feels like the loudest voice in the room. Fear of the other. Fear of what might happen if we open our hearts or change our minds. Fear can divide us like nothing else, splitting families, communities, even churches. It drives us to draw lines in the sand, to put up walls, to retreat into our own corners. But I want to tell you something important. Courage is stronger than fear. Courage is the quiet but fierce decision to face what divides us and to say, I will not let fear have the final word. Choosing courage means stepping into the uncomfortable spaces where real healing begins. It means listening to those we disagree with, not to win an argument, but to understand their story. It means standing up for truth and justice, even when it feels risky or lonely. It means being willing to admit when we are wrong and to seek forgiveness when we have caused harm. Courage asks us to do what is often hardest, to build bridges instead of walls, to refuse to let bitterness take root, to believe that our nation, our families, and our communities can be made whole again, not by uniformity, but by unity, rooted in respect and love. We don't have to agree on everything to stand together. We don't have to erase our differences to find common ground. Courage invites us to hold those tensions with grace and faith, knowing that sometimes the most powerful act is simply to show up with an open heart, a willing spirit, and a commitment to peace. This kind of courage is not reckless or loud. It is steady, it is patient. It is the kind of courage that Jesus showed when he faced injustice, rejection, and suffering, not with violence, but with love and truth. Our nation is crying out for this kind of courage, not the courage of domination or division, but the courage to face our fears honestly and to choose love anyway. Because love, real, courageous love, has the power to heal wounds, to restore hope, and to transform lives. So I ask you today, where is fear holding you back? What walls are you tempted to build around your heart? And how might God be calling you to step out in courage toward reconciliation, toward understanding, toward peace? Choosing courage over division is not easy. It is not quick, but it is necessary. Because the future we want, one marked by justice, peace, and belonging, depends on it. Let us be the people who dare to choose courage, the people who dare to believe that even in the hardest times, love can win. If we want to see healing in our nation, if we long to see peace where there has been conflict, unity where there has been division, we must begin with the place where true change starts, the human heart. No policy, no law, no movement can bring lasting healing unless it is reflected in the hearts of individuals. Each of us carries wounds, fears, and doubts that shape how we see the world and how we treat one another. Sometimes those wounds lead us to build walls of anger or mistrust. Sometimes they cause us to turn inward, forgetting that we are part of something larger. But healing begins when we are willing to look inside, when we are honest with ourselves about the places that hurt, the places that need repair. This is a brave act because it requires humility, the willingness to admit that we are not perfect, that we carry brokenness within us too. And yet it is also a hopeful act because once we recognize our own brokenness, we open the door to grace, we open the door to God's love, which can mend what is torn and renew what is weary. Healing the heart means learning to forgive, not just others, but ourselves. It means releasing the bitterness and anger that weigh us down so that compassion and understanding can take their place. It means choosing to see each person we meet as a child of God, worthy of dignity and respect, even when it is hard. When healing begins in the heart, it changes how we act in the world. It softens our words, guides our choices, and shapes our relationships. It gives us the strength to reach out to those we have hurt or who have hurt us. This is the work of the Spirit, the quiet, persistent call to be whole, to be reconciled, to be at peace. It is a work that takes time, patience, and grace, but it is real and possible. So I invite you today to begin this journey inward, to ask yourself, what needs healing in my heart? Where do I need to offer or receive forgiveness? How can I become a source of healing in my family, my community, and my nation? Remember, healing is not a one-time event. It is a daily choice to let go of fear and hate and to welcome love and hope. And as each heart is healed, the ripple spreads outward, touching lives and transforming our broken world. Healing begins with you. Healing begins with me. Healing begins in the human heart. In the midst of all the brokenness, the pain, and the uncertainty, there is a call to each one of us to become agents of reconciliation and hope. This is not a passive role. It is an active, courageous, and deeply spiritual calling. Reconciliation means more than simply making peace between two people or groups. It means working toward healing the deeper wounds that have caused division in the first place. It means acknowledging the past honestly, taking responsibility for harm, and committing to a future where justice and mercy walk hand in hand. As followers of Christ and as members of this nation, we are invited to be bridge builders. We are called to step into the spaces where others may fear to go, to listen with open hearts, to speak with gentle truth, and to act with bold love. Hope is the fuel that powers this work. Hope is the belief that things can be different, that light can shine in the darkest places, and that love can overcome even the deepest divides. When we become bearers of hope, we remind one another that we are not alone, that even when the road is long and the challenge is great, God is with us. This work begins in our communities, in our homes, in our neighborhood. It begins when we choose to extend grace instead of judgment, understanding instead of suspicion, kindness instead of anger. It grows when we support one another in our efforts to heal and rebuild. You may wonder, how can I, just one person, make a difference? The answer lies in faithfulness to small acts of love and courage. Each time you choose peace over conflict, each time you reach out to someone who feels isolated, each time you stand up for what is right, you are becoming an agent of change. Reconciliation and hope are not distant ideals. They are practical, lived realities that begin here and now. through your hands, your words, and your heart. So I invite you today to embrace this calling, to be a light in the darkness, to be a voice of peace in the noise, to be a living sign that healing is possible, that hope is real, and that love endures. Together, as a people united in faith and courage, we can build a future where division gives way to connection, despair gives way to joy, and fear gives way to hope. Let us be the agents of that future. Let us be the hands that heal, the hearts that forgive, and the voices that proclaim God's peace to a waiting world. The journey will not be easy, but it is the journey we are called to take, and with God's help, it is a journey filled with promise. As we stand at this moment together, I want us to remember something deeply true. Our nation's future is not written by the noise of anger or the silence of fear. It is written by the quiet strength of love. Love that chooses mercy over judgment, courage over division, and healing over despair. Each one of us carries within us the power to be a light in the darkness, a voice for the voiceless, a hand extended in peace. This is the sacred calling placed upon our hearts, not to wait for someone else to act, but to be the change we long to see. The road ahead will have its challenges. We will stumble, we will be tested. But with faith as our foundation and hope as our guide, we can rise above what divides us and build a future where every person is seen, heard, and valued. Let us go forward with courage. Let us go forward with mercy. Let us go forward with the unwavering belief that healing begins here. In each heart willing to open, in each soul ready to forgive, and in each life committed to love, may God bless this journey of reconciliation and hope. And may we be the faithful instruments of peace that our time so desperately needs. Thank you, and may God's grace be with you always.